All right, Alexander, let's talk about Germany. And we do have a new government now. It is official, and Merkel is officially gone. Uh, wasn't very momentous, to be quite honest. I thought there would be a lot more press about it. There was a ceremony a couple of days ago, but I don't know. It just kind of seems very anticlimactic to see Merkel go, and there wasn't really much fuss about it, at least in my view of things. And this new government does not look very strong at all either. Very shaky, or at least it's off to a shaky start. What do you make of the fact that Merkel is now officially out, and we have this
I
new
agree.
government officially in?
I agree on both counts. I think that her departure was extraordinarily anticlimactic. I get the impression that there's, if anything, a sense of not exactly relief that she's gone, but a sense suddenly of awareness that this supposed titan that dominated German and European politics for all those years is actually a titan made of straw, and that in fact she's left Germany and Europe in a much weaker place than when she found it. So I think that there's no celebration of Merkel, but at the same time, no very great confidence, no great optimism about the future either, because this new German government that's appearing is already looking extremely dysfunctional. The new chancellor is, by most accounts, a fairly level-headed person, but the coalition altogether really just doesn't add up. The various parts of it don't really make very much sense. And of course, the projects that it's embarking on seem to be, well, utopian and globalist to an extreme degree, and very out of tune, I suspect, to sentiment amongst a lot of Germans and in Europe generally. So with Merkel, a weary departure. I mean, she's left effectively like a thief in the night, quietly out of the back door. And the people who've taken over from her, very unconvincing, and very deep skepticism that they can amount to very much. That's how it looks to me.
How long do you think this government's going to last? It's the traffic. They call it
The traffic light coalition.
Correct, yeah.
Indeed. The problem with these sort of German governments is that the German political and constitutional system was created after the Second World War to foster stability and to make it very difficult for a government, even a failing government, to actually fall. So the risk we are running is that it could survive its full 4 years, even as all the various parties who make it up increasingly quarrel and fall out with each other. So we could end up, in effect, in Germany with a situation where we have, for all practical purposes, no German government at all. And this could continue for a very, very long time before there are elections. And bear in mind, if we are in that kind of situation, and it looks like the parties, especially the AfD, could start to capitalize on the breakdown of this coalition so that it might sweep the board in East Germany, for example, in any forthcoming election, and might start to make big inroads in places in West Germany too. Well, that could also keep this utterly dysfunctional and chaotic coalition going even longer. So we would have a situation which we had under Merkel, where in effect we had a kind of immobilism, to a situation which we might end up with a kind of chaos and a vacuum at the centre of Germany, with Merkel herself gone. Whatever we may think of Merkel, she was a person who was the keystone of the arch of German politics. She was always there. She held things together. With her gone, it all looks much, much more fragile than it did, even though, as I said, it looks as if nobody is actually sorry to see her go.
Well, that's the problem with Merkel, is that she held things together, but she held things together in a terrible way. I mean, I'm looking at it from the outside looking in. For Europe, she held things together in a terrible way. I mean, she was really bad for for Europe, in my opinion. But she didn't really do much as far as keeping things stable so that a new government could come in and pick up from where she left off. I mean, she really just hollowed out the political system, and she made it so that you really don't have any viable replacements for her. I mean, there is no viable succession to Merkel at this point in Germany, or Europe for that matter. Macron,
well, that's exactly what
Macron, or who takes over in Europe now?
Well, exactly. Well, that's exactly the point. I mean, that's exactly how she remained in power as long as she did. She's like that. She's like that plant which poisons the ground around it. She destroyed every political figure who, within Germany itself, could potentially have posed a threat to her. She weakened the entire political system. She weakened all the parties. So the CDU-CSU, which was a big, powerful, dominant party in Germany ever since the Second World War, has now shrunk to about half its size. The SPD has also is a diminished force compared to the political force it was in, say, the time of Willy Brandt or Helmut Schmidt or even Gerhard Schröder. The Greens have grown, but nobody really sees them as a convincing force either. All of these different parties look far weaker than they did previously, and that's largely her creation. She, as I said, deliberately weakened everybody, all the political forces around her, because that was the way she remained in control. She removed all the potential leaders within the CDU in case they challenged her, and she weakened all of the various parties in Germany as a result. And of course, in terms of European politics, far from holding things together, as people say she did, what she did was she caused the political culture of Europe to wither away. So we have a political desert in Germany. We have a political desert in Europe. We have a Europe where people like Ursula von der Leyen are now considered, important people. And we have a government in Germany which is completely dysfunctional. That is her legacy. People sense it. They're not able fully to articulate it. But the problem is, with her gone, she at least provided that stability at the centre, and with no one able to take her place, because she made sure there would be no one who could take her place, it's debatable how long that stability that she did create can last. She reminds me, if I can just indulge myself in a little history here, of another earlier German political figure who was Prince Metternich, who dominated European and German politics as the Austrian Chancellor in the early 19th century. And he did exactly the same thing. He basically created a political system based on immobilism and stagnation, which propped him up. When he fell, the entire system that he created collapsed within years of him gone. And within a few years, the whole structure that he had created had collapsed, because without him, it simply couldn't work. And Merkel, it seems to me, is very like him.
If Macron should win the elections in September in France, is he the person that's going to be heading up Europe? Is he Merkel's replacement as far as keeping the EU moving along towards their goals? Is Macron the guy if he wins in September?
Yeah, that's been his dream. That's what he's wanted. And of course, he's now got allies in the new German government, because his massive integrationist program is one which the Greens absolutely support. They want to see a federated Europe, just as he does. Of course, the difference is he wants it because he wants to control it and he wants France to run it. The Greens want it because they have their plan of using a federated Europe to impose their green policies on everyone in Europe, because they say or pretend to believe that that's the way to save the planet. So you have an overlap between what they want. The problem is, I suspect that as this project gains hold, if Macron asserts himself, and there are lots of people in Europe don't like Macron, lots of people in Europe don't like the Greens. If they try and do it, they will push down the accelerator on a car that is already disintegrating and breaking down. I mean, one of the things that Merkel was very good at was that she understood how rickety, if you like, the car actually was. So she kept it chugging along, but she didn't make it drive too fast. If Macron gets his way in alliance with the Greens after the April elections in France, then you could start to see the whole thing start to break down, the wheels flying off, all sorts of things happening, because the car isn't built for the kind of acceleration that Macron and the Greens want from it.
Yeah. You also see Macron, he's aligning himself very closely with Italy and with Draghi as well. So you can see that he's trying to move some pieces
Absolutely
in place for him to take charge of the European Union, to be the Merkel's successor, but the thing, so to speak. Yeah.
Exactly. That's what he conceives of himself as being. I mean, I wonder whether someone like Olaf Scholz, who will be the new Chancellor, will be happy with that. But bear in mind, if the Greens are prepared to go along with Macron's strategies, because this government in Germany looks so weak, you will have an effect, a power vacuum in Berlin, and with a person like Macron, he will try to take advantage of it. But as I said, the problems, the constraints within the European system, I suspect, are not going to be political, they're going to be economic. We're going to see increasing strains in the Euro system. If you try and accelerate things at that sort of level of speed, you're going to see strains in every sector of the European economy starting to build, and build very rapidly. As the car, as I said, its engine overheats, and the various parts of it start to fall off. So, in a way, these people getting what they want could accelerate the collapse of the system, which Merkel, in her much more measured way, just knew how to keep it going from one crisis to another. She knew how, instead of putting it too fast, well, there'd be one thing would go wrong, and then they do a patch up, and they tinker on to the next step, and on every occasion it would move a little bit further along the road, not at great speed, all sorts of damage being done in the process, but at least she kept the car on the road. As I said, with Macron and the Greens, I can easily see how things could easily fall apart, how we could get closer to that systems collapse, which I've been talking about for a very long time.
Yeah, that is why the European Union is so hell-bent on making sure they control the population, and that's why they're so much in a rush to make sure they get everyone signed up to their various mandates and policies. And everyone who's watched this video understands exactly where I'm taking this. That's why they're in a panic to get everything done.
Well, indeed. And the most authoritarian leader in Europe is Macron, and the most authoritarian party in Europe are the Greens, the German Greens. You only have to follow them to see how authoritarian they actually are. They may like to pose as the great exponents of counterculture, but the reality is they are no such thing.
Yeah. Where does Merkel go next? I think, is it possible that she does a bait and switch and ends up running the EU in like three,
not impossible.
4 years?
Well, can I just say something? I mean, if things start to fall apart, it's not impossible that they will turn back to Merkel. I mean, because, she was, after all, the person who seemed to know how to keep things together. So, it's not impossible. I think what her eye is on, actually, is not the European Commission. I think she wants a cushy job. Head of the IMF is one possibility. I mean, that seems to me, after all, you had Christine Lagarde there, so, she won't be there for very long. So, on the principle that you want one failed leader succeeding another, given that Christine Lagarde has failed so entirely, you want someone who's an even greater failure. So Frau Merkel seems to fit the bill.
You mean the IMF or the ECB?
Oh, well, the ECB too. I'm sorry, but Lagarde was both of the IMF and the ECB. You're quite
both,
right.
yeah, that's what I
sometimes
she got promoted up.
She got promoted up, so it might be the ECB. You know, you could see Merkel at the ECB or the IMF or someplace like that. Well, I think that is a real possibility. She could, I mean, UN Secretary General. Was if she wanted that, she'd have to persuade the Chinese and the Russians to take her. I could just about see it, actually. I think that Putin is known to have us not particularly like her, but they did work together. So, you know, possibly they might agree to it. Not inconceivable.
How do you think Merkel, final question, how do you think Merkel will be remembered?
I think she will be remembered very much like Metternich is. In other words, as the person who set the scene for Europe's collapse. I mean, as the empress who ultimately had no clothes, who created a dysfunctional architecture and who weakened Germany. I mean, I've no doubt about that at all. I mean, she made, in my opinion, 3 colossally bad decisions which will haunt her and which are her legacy. The one was that she decided during the financial crisis, the 2008 financial crisis, that instead of letting each country sort out its own problems and default if they needed to, that she would bail out the banks, the German banks, in effect by bailing out those countries and by imposing impossible conditions on them. So she turned the Eurozone into an impossible straitjacket. So that's one thing she did. She distorted and corrupted what was already the very flawed concept of European monetary union. She took it on a disastrous course. The second thing is that she locked Europe and Germany into a confrontation with Russia over Ukraine. A massive mistake. A German leader especially should know better. But that's what she did. And the third mistake she made was that she wanted to win kudos amongst liberal opinion in the United States by opening Europe's borders and by allowing mass migration into Europe. So she did all those 3 things, and the overall legacy is malign. And on top of that, she conducted politics in Europe and Germany itself in a way that has created an incredibly dysfunctional situation, both in Germany and in Europe, and has led to stagnation in Germany, both at a political and, by the way, at an economic level.
All right, we will leave it there. Goodbye, Merkel. Good riddance. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. But we may be wishing for her to return. Who knows?
Well,
The next person is always worse.
I know. In spite of that, I'm not going to say Auf Wiedersehen. I don't want to see him back.
Yeah. All right. We'll leave it there. Duran.locals.com. Go to the Duran shop, 10% off when you use the code Good Day, and make sure to look for us on SuperU, BitChute, ODYSEE, and Rumble. Make sure to look for us on all those platforms. You will find the link down below. Take care.